You've been told a lie since you were young, that you're incomplete until someone else completes you. That love is the highest achievement. That romance is what gives life meaning. But Nietzsche would scoff at this. He believed that most relationships don't liberate, they enslave. Think about it. How often have you seen someone trade their individuality for comfort, their ambition for acceptance, their clarity for emotional chaos? The modern world worships the idea of romantic completion. Movies, songs, society, they all push the narrative that being in a relationship is the goal. But Nietzsche saw this as spiritual laziness, a surrender to conformity. He didn't hate love, he hated false dependencies. He believed that becoming truly powerful, truly awake, requires solitude, not loneliness, solitude. Because solitude is where the self is born, where illusions are burned away, where the real questions echo loudest. Who am I without distraction? What do I want, not what society expects? What could I become if I stopped wasting time trying to be loved? Most people never ask these questions because they're afraid of the answers, and so they rush into relationships, not out of strength, but out of fear. Nietzsche believed that most people don't fall in love, they fall into distraction. They chase connection not because they're whole, but because they're broken. They crave validation, comfort, a crutch, and in doing so, they dilute their own identity. That's why staying single, truly single, not just between relationships, is not a weakness, it's a revolution. It means facing your own mind. It means refining your purpose. It means becoming so powerful in your aloneness that you never again depend on someone else to feel worthy. And here's the brutal truth. Most relationships today are transactional. What can you do for me? How can you make me feel good? Can you heal my wounds without me doing the work? That's not love. That's a bargain. Nietzsche would say that the greatest act of love is not to lose yourself in another, but to master yourself so deeply that you can finally offer something real. And until you've done that, until you've bled in solitude, until you've conquered your own chaos, you have nothing to give but neediness. So what does staying single really offer you? Time? Focus? Growth? Freedom? Freedom from compromise? From emotional entanglement? From negotiating your path with someone who doesn't understand it? Freedom to become, to build, to fall and rise without explanation. Nietzsche believed the path of greatness is walked alone. The Übermensch, the higher man, is forged in fire, not in affection. He walks without crutches. He chooses his suffering. And he rises not to be loved, but to be sovereign. So if you're single right now, embrace it. Don't chase validation. Don't seek someone to complete you. Use this time. Use it ruthlessly. Read, train, create, heal, silence the noise. Cut the addictions. Build a mind no one can manipulate. Because when you do that, when you become complete on your own, you become dangerous. Not to hurt people, but to finally choose love without needing it. And that is a power most people will never taste. Modern culture treats singleness like a waiting room, a temporary state you must escape from. The message is clear. If you're still alone, you're doing something wrong. But Nietzsche saw it differently. He believed that the moment you make your happiness dependent on another person, you've surrendered the very thing that makes you powerful, your will. In his view, human beings were not made to blend in. We were made to ascend, to evolve, to overcome ourselves. And nothing sabotages that ascent faster than emotional dependency. Most people don't realize it, but their relationships are driven by fear. Fear of being alone, fear of failure, fear of not being enough unless someone else confirms it. And so, they merge with another person not because of love, but because of insecurity. Nietzsche called this kind of living a form of slavery, not physical, but psychological. He warned that when we cling to others for identity, we become fragments of ourselves. And the tragedy? We think that's noble. We call it compromise. We call it romance. We call it partnership. But in reality, most people are just trading their authenticity for comfort. Here's the brutal truth Nietzsche understood. Most relationships are just agreements to stay weak together. They cushion each other's flaws. They validate each other's delusions. They distract each other from growth. Two people bonded not by shared strength, but by mutual avoidance. That's why Nietzsche believed in solitude, not as isolation, but as preparation. Preparation to become someone who doesn't need anyone. Not out of coldness, not because love is worthless, but because the man who doesn't need love is finally capable of giving it without condition. And that's rare. Look around. How many people can say they'd be fine, not broken, if their relationship ended today? How many can say, I love you, but I don't need you? That's not detachment, that's power. But to get there, you have to spend time in the fire of your own mind, to sit with your flaws, to wrestle your demons, to destroy the parts of yourself that only exist to be liked. It's in solitude that the real transformation happens. Because there's nowhere to hide, no one to impress, no safety net, just you, your chaos, your potential. And in that pressure chamber, you either break or become something unshakable. This is the gift of staying single. Time to build your value without distraction. Time to identify what matters to you before someone else rewrites your priorities. Time to know your worth without needing it mirrored in someone else's eyes. Most people never give themselves that chance. They bounce from one emotional tether to another, terrified of facing the void. But Nietzsche didn't fear the void. He believed that the man who stares into the abyss and doesn't flinch owns himself. So if you're single and people make you feel like you're behind, remember this: you're not behind, you're ahead. Because you're doing what most people are too scared to do: become whole. And when you're whole, you stop attracting chaos. You stop tolerating mediocrity. You stop settling for relationships that drain you. Because you no longer need to be needed. You've become something stronger, something rarer, someone who can choose love freely, not as an escape, but as a gift. Here's something most people will never admit. They don't want love. They want control. They want someone who will fit neatly into the role they've imagined. Someone who validates them, uplifts them, never challenges them too deeply. They don't want a real connection. They want a mirror. And when the mirror cracks, when the other person shows their own will, suddenly it's over. Because love in modern culture is not based on truth. It's based on ego maintenance. Nietzsche saw this game for what it is: a stage play where everyone wears a mask. The mask of the good partner, the mask of the supportive spouse, the mask of the ideal lover. But underneath it all, he believed most people aren't in love with the other. They're in love with the idea of being loved. That's why so many relationships turn toxic, not because one person is evil, but because both are using each other to avoid facing themselves. You can't build a kingdom with someone if both of you are still looking for your self-worth in each other's eyes. That's why Nietzsche emphasized the will to power, not over others, but over yourself. Until you can sit alone in a quiet room and feel complete, you have no business giving your heart to anyone. Because if you do, it won't be love you're offering. It will be need. And that's the root of most dysfunction. Two people clinging to each other because they haven't done the inner work. Two people expecting the other to fix wounds they won't even name. Nietzsche saw how society romanticized this dysfunction. We turned codependency into a virtue. We praise people who never leave each other's side, even when both are drowning. But he knew that true greatness, true selfhood, comes from separation first, unity later. You must know how to walk alone before you can walk beside someone. You must face your darkness before you try to hold someone else's. And you must stop asking for love to save you, and instead ask yourself what you're doing to deserve it. Because here's the raw truth. If you haven't mastered your own life, you'll destroy anyone who tries to love you. Not because you mean to, but because the emptiness inside you will demand more than anyone can give. That's why singleness is not a curse. It's a gift. It's a sacred window where you can build the kind of life you'd be proud to invite someone into. A life built on discipline, clarity, strength. A life where you're not chasing high highs or avoiding discomfort, but cultivating inner stability. Nietzsche would argue that most people aren't single for long enough. They rush to fill the silence, to avoid their own reflection. But if you stay in the silence long enough, something powerful happens. You stop seeking. You start creating. You stop asking, "Who will love me?" and start asking, "What do I stand for?" That's when attraction shifts. You stop drawing in people who feed your wounds and start attracting those who recognize your strength. Because you're no longer pretending to be lovable. You've become it. Not through flattery, not through appeasement, but by doing the work. So if you're still single, don't see it as a void to be filled. See it as a fire to be walked through. One that will burn away the falsehoods, the desperation, the ego stories. And when you emerge on the other side, you'll no longer crave attention. You'll no longer chase validation. You'll simply be. And that being will attract only what is real. Most people enter relationships as a way to feel safe, but Nietzsche believed that safety is the enemy of greatness. In a world obsessed with comfort, routine, and reassurance, freedom has become radical. And true freedom, especially emotional freedom, can't exist when you're constantly adjusting yourself to keep someone else happy. This is what Nietzsche called herd morality, the instinct to conform, to smooth out your edges, to not make waves. And relationships often become the perfect breeding ground for it. Because the moment you start measuring your worth by someone else's approval, you've already lost the most important thing, your independence of thought. Think about it. How many men start off strong, ambitious, creative, only to shrink as the relationship progresses? Not because they're weak, but because they've been trained to believe that compromise is love and self-denial is maturity, so they silence their opinions. They stop chasing their dreams, they trade mission for harmony. And over time, they become shadows of who they used to be. Nietzsche saw this as a form of spiritual suicide. To give up your vision for the sake of fitting into someone else's expectations is not love, it's decay. He warned that if you tie your identity too tightly to another person, you'll never develop your full strength. You'll always have one eye on them, always calculating, adjusting, appeasing. That's not connection, that's self-erasure. And it's a tragedy because the person you're trying to impress will eventually lose respect for you. Why? Because no one truly admires someone who betrays themselves. Even subconsciously, people sense when you've abandoned your own power. They sense when your love comes from fear, not freedom. And ironically, the more you try to secure someone's affection, by making yourself small, the more they drift away. That's why Nietzsche championed the sovereign individual, someone who chooses solitude over slavery, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Because if you're afraid to be alone, you'll tolerate anything. You'll lower your standards. You'll overlook red flags. You'll ignore your gut instinct. But when solitude is no longer scary, when you can walk alone without flinching, that's when you become untouchable. Because now your love is no longer bait. It's not a currency you trade for attention. It's an offering, not a demand. And only the rarest people will know what to do with it. So here's the challenge Nietzsche would issue. Can you build a life so full, so disciplined, so purposeful that a relationship would be an enhancement, not a necessity? Can you become so content in your own presence that no person could manipulate you with the threat of absence? That's power. And that's what staying single gives you the space to cultivate, not because you hate relationships, not because you're unlovable, but because you refuse to settle. You refuse to compromise your evolution. For a taste of temporary comfort, it takes courage, it takes self-respect, it takes brutal honesty. But when you've done the work, when you've faced your loneliness and turned it into strength, you'll stop attracting people who want to fix you and start drawing in people who respect you. Because you've become the kind of person who doesn't chase connection. You create it from a place of wholeness. Here's the irony no one talks about. Once you stop needing a relationship, you become the kind of man people chase. Why? Because there's something magnetic about someone who's complete within himself. He's not desperate, he's not performing, he's not searching for someone to fill the void. That's the man Nietzsche pointed to, a man who has embraced solitude not as punishment, but as preparation. While the masses race to find someone, anyone, to avoid the pain of being alone, you quietly do the opposite. You slow down, you turn inward, you confront the chaos. And in that process, something radical happens. You begin to understand yourself, not in the shallow personality test kind of way, but in the deeper, darker, more honest way. You face your fears, you recognize your patterns, you admit your lies, and you stop asking for someone else to fix them. You realize no one can make you feel loved if you haven't made peace with yourself. And this is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of becoming who you are, not who your parents wanted, not who society expects, not who your ex tried to mold, but you, stripped down to your raw, sovereign essence. And here's the reward. When you build that level of self, you don't enter relationships out of lack. You enter them from a place of overflow. You're not there to be saved. You're not there to play a role. You're there to share your life, not hand it over. And that's what terrifies most people, because that kind of love can't be controlled. It's not rooted in need. It's rooted in truth. Most won't be ready for it. They'll call you cold. They'll say you're too independent, too guarded, too focused. But the right ones will recognize it. They'll feel the weight of your presence. They'll sense the depth you bring. And they'll either rise to meet it or walk away. Either way, you remain whole. That's the ultimate freedom. And it only comes when you've embraced the journey that singleness offers, because that journey forces you to stop pretending, to stop outsourcing your worth, to stop chasing illusions of love that were never about love in the first place. Nietzsche didn't say this life would be easy. He knew it would be painful. But he also knew that pain is the forge of the individual, that only through discomfort do we become worthy of true connection. Not the kind that fades after the honeymoon, but the kind that challenges, sharpens, and expands both people. So if you're single right now, don't rush to escape it. Use it. Turn it into a season of building, of clarifying, of strengthening. Because the man who masters solitude is the man no one can manipulate. He's not afraid to walk away, not afraid to stand alone. And that makes him dangerous in the best possible way.